Okay, so this ought to be...
They say one of the rarest sounds in all of nature is the sound of a progressive Western feminist unequivocally condemning Islamic misogyny.
Which one of these is
I heard a rumour that somebody heard it once, but that it was quickly drowned out by a shrill chorus of Islamophobe and racist and was never heard again. Although I'm an atheist, I'm often tempted to become religious, just so that I can ask God to keep a special place in hell for progressive feminists who excuse or ignore Islamic misogyny for cultural reasons. Women who are quick to condemn inappropriate language on Twitter and who are all intellectual tooth and claw when it comes to Christianity, but who at the first sight of a crescent moon seem to magically evaporate like fairies in the mist. I'm talking about you. You women who confidently challenge everyday sexism, but who are struck deaf and dumb in the presence of Islamic misogyny, don't seem to realise that this is itself misogynistic and is literally giving feminism a bad name. If you want to be culturally sensitive towards, I'll say it again, Islamic misogyny, you can't be a feminist. It's impossible. Besides, if you are, you'll automatically be a racist, because in your twisted progressive terms, when it comes to Islam, feminism equals racism, as does anything that challenges Islamic supremacy. And we all know that the word racist is like kryptonite to you progressives. Within your bubble of delusion, it's been magnified so that it looms over everything you think and say, and you'd rather be tasered than have it anywhere near you, so when you see it coming, you run the other way, trampling women and children if necessary. Turn a blind eye to religiously endorsed wife-beating, forced marriage, honour killing, genital mutilation, organised rape gangs, Sharia courts that treat women as less than fully human, and little girls forced to dress like nuns. Turn a blind eye to Islamic misogyny, or you'll be a racist. You racist. Any Western woman thinking of visiting an Arab country right now, especially Dubai, should think about visiting a psychiatrist first. Recently, a Norwegian woman made the mistake of telling the police in Dubai that she'd been raped. And because she didn't have 4 male witnesses, she was charged with adultery and given a longer sentence than the rapist. These cases are common in backward moral cesspits like Dubai, where Islamic values apply, and therefore adultery is a more serious crime than rape, even when you haven't done it and the rapist has. This kind of backward, ugly attitude towards women prevails throughout much of the Islamic world, and it's being deliberately imported wholesale into Western society, unchallenged and uncorrected, thanks to the insane progressive view that all cultures are equal, except of course for Western culture, which is inferior. And this is making life more dangerous for women. Norway and Sweden used to be among the safest countries for women. Now they're best known for their high levels of Islamic immigrant rape that nobody in power wants to acknowledge or do anything about, because that would be racist. Consequently, Norwegian and Swedish women are no longer safe in their own countries for cultural reasons. Indeed, Sweden has been so enriched by Islamic immigration that its women statistically have a 25% chance of being raped in their lifetime. But at least they're not racists, and that's the main thing. Meanwhile, here in England, another day, another Pakistani Muslim rape gang. Nobody can agree on what the root cause might be, but the progressive consensus is that it can't have anything to do with the misogynistic religion these men all share, and that it must be society's fault in some way. And to be fair, it is largely our fault. We've imported millions of people from Pakistan, one of the most backward Islamic countries on earth, and that's saying something, often from the most backward tribal areas where women suffer appalling treatment, where they're regularly beaten at home, where child marriage and so-called honour killing is rife, and where a rape victim is liable to be raped again at the police station if she reports it. That's if she hasn't already been murdered by her own family. When we import that culture into our society, uncritically, unfiltered, with no requirement to integrate, what do we expect to happen? And who can be surprised when it does? We even officially sanction Islamic misogyny now in Britain. We've made it respectable. We have dozens of Sharia courts that are allowed to discriminate against women purely for being women. If anyone dared to treat a person that way based on race rather than gender, there would rightly be public uproar. So where are all the feminists with their protests and demonstrations? The fact is, women's rights are less important, aren't they? And are in fact negotiable. When it comes to appeasing a religion, invented by men for the benefit of men, that punishes women for being raped by men. The principle has now been established in Britain that we are not, in fact, all equal. Some people are inferior for cultural reasons, and they are all female. So forgive me for being blunt about this, girls, but there are more important things to get angry about than offensive language on Twitter or sexist comments about your appearance. But then I would say that because, unlike you, I believe the liberation of women from Islam is as urgent a political cause for all humanity as was the abolition of slavery. There's no room for politeness or sensitivity, and there's no reason for any. Islam's treatment of women, its entire view of women, is a sin. And if there is a God, that's what he'll be punishing, if he punishes anything at all. It's not culturally different. It's culturally inferior. It's an ugly echo of the Dark Ages. And for the life of me, I can't understand why every woman on earth doesn't oppose it with all her heart and soul. But as we all know, many of them don't, especially the ones who ought to know better. Instead, they excuse it, they indulge it, and they condone it at other people's expense because their stupid progressive politics have got the better of their common sense. If you accommodate Islamic misogyny, you legitimize it and you invite it into your own life and into the lives of your children because it's coming your way. You also help to ensure that the woman in Pakistan or Saudi Arabia who gets beaten every day will continue to be beaten and treated as a piece of property, as will her daughters and granddaughters all the way down the line. Why should these places change their ways when we in the West make it perfectly clear that we're okay with their vile misogyny for cultural reasons? It's lucky that you progressive feminists are ideologically sound enough to ignore the reality of those cultural reasons, or you might not be able to sleep at night.
Okay, so I want to get your off-the-cuff response to that because I am a Western progressive, and that's the word that I identify with the most. And then, also feminist. So I'm obviously going to have a bias against what he says. I have never condoned, I've spoken against Islamic misogyny many times in many of my videos and so forth. But I want to know what credence does he have from your perspective? What is your off-the-cuff response to this video?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna. This is a very complicated issue that I've been through since I've been to United States. Is that we have these labels and we when it comes to term progressive and progressives has different schools inside of progressive, and there are those who are like yourself who may be more objectivist, and there are those who identify as a progressive who are cultural relativists, and he was putting more. He kind of lumped in all the progressive within similar category, and I think that is kind of a fallacy. But there is undeniable school or group of people who identify as a progressive and liberal, actually the most, who are extremely cultural relativist and extremely cultural. And what they call cultural sensitive is that they think that any criticism of anyone's culture is racist. And the example of Ben Affleck with Bill Maher and Sam Harris, when Sam Harris mentioned that we should be critical of bad ideas, and the first thing that Ben Affleck came to his mind is that this is racist. So yes. And it's also, I mean, those of us, I mean, I identify as a liberal myself, and I care a lot about liberal issues and stuff like this, but it sometimes makes me ashamed of the term liberal when I hear the cultural relativists talking, because, and I've met many of them who consider that rape is a crime in America because the culture thinks it's a crime, but it's not a crime in Afghanistan because the culture thinks differently. And this view, how crazy it may sound, but it exists, and we have to acknowledge that for those of us who are liberal. That's why I spend a lot of my time criticizing liberal people for defending Islam, and not only defend. I mean, the term Islam is also kind of a very complex term, and sometimes when it comes to him as well is that he also lumped Islam in one category. Is that, I mean, what Islam means different things for different people. Yes, I do acknowledge that Islam is not monolithic, but at the same time, there are a group of people, like there is a large percentage who believe similar things. So yes, we can say that Islam is monolithic and we cannot criticize it all, but the percentage is kind of more high when it comes to those who believe in Orthodox Islam and Orthodox interpretations versus the progressive interpretations. And all the statistics show, and I've done many speeches about them, and for those who can check out my speech on Abastakon about it, and there's a full video in which I say all the statistics from the United Nations Social and Economic about the comparison of women's rights in terms of economic opportunity and gender gap and things like that. So it's Orthodox Islam has, the worst places to be a woman and homosexual in this world is Muslim dominated countries. The first 10. There are 13 countries that execute people for being atheists and non-believers and freethinkers. All of them are Muslim countries. I don't think there is any deny between the link of Orthodox, and I have to mention Orthodox Islam, because the word Islam is not really, I don't think it's a word to be used, because there are different sects of Islam and there are different interpretations. So I would rather go to the school that identifies, which deals with these issues, that apostates should be killed, women are second-class citizens, and homosexuals should be put to death. These are schools that exist within Orthodox school of Islam, and things like Wahhabi Islam is also a school of Orthodox Islam that actually endorses killing of apostates and homosexuals, etc. So what is unfortunate, and I think that some liberals, and large number of liberals in America, have failed us, the liberals from the Middle East, by thinking that because Muslims are a minority in America, they think that if they're going to criticize Islam, that's going to contribute to the racism that exists against immigrants in America, and therefore they think of Islam as a minority religion within American domestic politics, but Islam is a majority religion in most of the Muslim countries, especially in the Middle East and Southeast Asia.
Yeah, if I could throw something else in on that, here in America, a lot of the Protestant Christians want to disassociate from Catholicism to say that Catholics somehow aren't Christian, and that Mormons aren't Christian either. But if you get rid of Catholics account for actually more than half of the total population of Christians. So if Catholics aren't Christians, that means that Christianity is no longer the dominant religion on earth. Islam is already the dominant religion on earth, and Christianity, if you're only talking about Protestant Christianity, ends up being, I think, the fourth largest religion, and it's after Hindus. So there's twice as many Hindus in the world today as there are Protestant Christians.
Yeah, that's true, and there are more Orthodox Muslims than there are progressive ones, and so I'm one of the what they call the moderate atheists. I don't know where did that term come from, but when I talk to Muslims, that I do acknowledge the existence of moderate Muslims and progressive Muslims. I don't think that all Muslims are radical or all Muslims are ISIS and Al Qaeda. I obviously don't believe that. I grew up in a Muslim family household, and I grew up in Baghdad, and most of my neighbors were, to some extent, progressive and liberal to that region. Obviously, they're not liberal by American standards, but at the same time, I acknowledge that Orthodox Islam, that is, holds beliefs that are anti-basic human rights, is not a minority view, and ISIS and Al Qaeda is not a minority view. They're not a majority view, but they're not a minority as well. And there is maybe not all Muslims, or not a large number of Muslims that go and behead people on the streets, but if you ask them simple questions about what do they think about apostates, and what do they think about homosexuals, and what do they think about the rights of women, and most of the answers are going to be completely against what we think of liberal values. So the majority of Muslims are not liberal,
Mm-hmm.
That's for a fact. And but there are some who are, and we need to support them, and we need to but to so I think that he did some sort of generalization that can be prevented and can be explained better. And that's why, I mean, I care deeply about this issue, and I care deeply about it because I do care about where I grew up from. I do want to change the Middle East and things of that sort, and it's not helpful to create generalizations, especially when now with United States foreign policy and which people to side with and which people not to side with. I mean, an example of a progressive version of Islam or a liberal version of Islam would be the Kurds, and if we're gonna support these guys to kind of create their own state and be a good example for a modern nation in the Middle East, that would be great. But if you're gonna say that Islam endorses this and all Muslims are all, that is, there is only one version of Islam that says this, and this is all what Muslims are following, then you're not gonna be able to help those who actually have an evolved version of Islam or a kind of progressive version. So I think he's guilty of generalization, but at the same time what he's saying can be said about orthodox interpretation of Islam, and that's common view in the Muslim world.
Okay, so what he says about the the generalization about Islam we'll cover in the next video I want to show you. But in the meantime, you said something about, I think you described me as a moral objectivist.
Yes,
You contrasted that to cultural relativist.
Yes, is that there are those within the liberal, and that's, and I mean I can speak with experience, and I can speak with research, is that this view that Islam should be immune from criticism, and those who criticize Islam are white redneck bigots and racists, is that something that is extremely common within the liberal view.
Yeah, see, this is a problem that I have, is that I have genuine concerns, or what I feel are genuine concerns against Islam. But the very fact that I find myself identifying with, but that I agree on any point with the demographic that you just described. Normally, I would disagree on anything that they say. So if I agree on anything with that other group, with the typical, white redneck American, I feel just because I am a white redneck American, what do I know about the Middle East? And so I'm cautious to say anything. That's why I'm talking to you. That's why I talk to people in Dubai. I want an informed opinion. I don't want somebody that's just going to echo chamber and tell me what I want to hear. I don't want to be wrong, especially if I'm going to be stating something in a public venue some way. I want to make sure that what I'm saying is right, and if it's not right, then somebody needs to point out why it's not right. And so that's why I'm talking to you now. So if I can get one more comment about that before I show you that other video.
Yeah, so we have, when it comes to Islam, and that is what, like, the Western world has been, is that we have two main groups that are speaking extremely vocally about Islam. And the first group is the extreme right wing, or the far right, who do believe that there is a cosmic war between Christianity and Islam, and so they're the Christian right, like for example the Pastor Jones who burned the Quran for 9/11. He's from Florida, and so you have this very vocal group that is anti-Islam, like they are passing what's called anti-Sharia law, because they want to establish a Christian nation in America, and they think that Sharia law is a, and then on the other side, you have the far left, so-called progressives, or extreme progressives, let's put them this way, not to generalize on whole progressives, but they say the far left in America, who are like, no, Islam is an inherently peaceful religion, and all of this.
Who says that?
These views are extremely. I don't want to mention names because I don't want to constantly being plugged about.
The only reason I say this is because, like I said, I personally identify as a progressive. I couldn't say what you just said.
You should go more to Ivy Leagues and see what these guys are saying, and I mean, and that view actually exists. Not to bring a name, and I'm gonna bring a name right now. Is that the Yale Atheist Humanist group sided with the Muslim Student Association at Yale University to stand against Ayaan Hirsi Ali, saying that criticizing Islam is racist, and the Ayaan Hirsi Ali does not represent, quote unquote, the ex-Muslim experience.
Okay,
I don't know
let me ask
whatever
you-
that means, but there's no such thing as ex-Muslim experience. I mean, my brother, my cousin, my best friend was killed by Al Qaeda. Not every ex-Muslims or not everyone who grew up in Iraq got 3 people close to them killed by Al Qaeda. There's not my experience only speaks for myself. I cannot speak for anyone, even from Iraq or the whole freaking world who are ex-Muslims.
Yeah, there's nobody in my family that has a similar experience to what I have.
Exactly,
So-
but they made this like fantasy that they post on their Facebook wall that in their Facebook, and they made a statement that and I've talked to many of them, many of this Yale atheist group, and I get disappointed more and more every time I talk to them, is that they think that when it comes to ISIS and when it comes to Al Qaeda and things like this, that it was all American US foreign policy mistake and it has nothing to do with Islam, and Islam is the origin of peace. And these guys are, and they're very vocal progressives, and those of us who are liberal cannot deny that this thing exists. You may not see it, but it exists,
Okay,
and
but-
it's vocal.
I don't want to pretend that things don't exist that I don't want to see. I mean, I'm personally uncomfortable with making broad brush generalizations against whole swaths of people.
Of course.
And when we're talking about 1 billion people, that's a pretty broad brush if you're going to put them all in the same category.
Yeah, I mean that you have Islam, which is an ideology, and you have people, and we always have to differentiate that, and and you have different schools in Islam followed by different people in different regions around the world, but it's also true that you can say that Islam is not monolithic, but at the same time there is a large, like the Sunni and Shia schools within Islam hold a very large percentage of the Muslim world. Even it's true that the Muslims are not monolithic, but it's not like divided into 20% the way that you can say that, oh, there's a huge difference. I mean, even the, and if I'm gonna make a generalized statement, I mean, even the best country within the Muslim world when it comes to human rights and stuff, Turkey, which is kind of a secular country,
Turkey.
Yes,
Turkey is a secular country.
it is by constitution.
They're the
but-
they're the only country that rejects evolution worse than the United States does, and this is because of Harun Yahya.
Harun Yahya, yes. So you have this. This is the best in the Muslim world.
Turkey.
Turkey.
That's
So-
not saying anything positive.
That
for-
is not saying. It's just like saying that like Sarah Palin is an intelligent person. That is exactly how it sounds. It's
Yeah.
like the best you got in the Muslim world is still far much worse than the Western world. That is what the truth is. Is that yes, the Muslim world is not monolithic, and I've been into many countries around the Muslim world. I've been to Turkey, I've been to Lebanon, I've been to Southeast Asia, I grew up in Iraq, I've been to Syria, I've been to Jordan, I've been all over across the world. And yes, there are countries that are better than others. Lebanon, like Beirut, capital, is kind of more progressive compared to southern Iraq. That's for sure. You cannot say that Beirut and southern Iraq are the same thing. But at the same time, it's still far much behind compared to the Western world and Sweden and Denmark and Canada and the United States. So yes, it is not monolithic, but at the same time, it is still far much behind. And Turkey and Indonesia, which is kind of and like Nicholas Christoph from the New York Times said that about like only 14% of Indonesians believe that apostates should be killed, and that's like 40 million people. So like I emailed him and I was like, so only 40 million people in Indonesia think I should be killed. Only 40 million people.
And I
so
want to
that's
express
like,
this.
It's like that is too much already.
If the term that you gave, the label that you put on me, the moral objectivist applies, then I have to consider that you should be deserving of death, not for anything that you've done, but rather what you believe. And to me, that's abhorrent. I am convinced that no superior being would ever damn anyone according to whether they believe or what they believe. that you should be judged by your actions and that's it.
Well, beliefs have consequences. I mean, I don't really think that we shouldn't judge people by their beliefs, because beliefs have and by moral objectivist I meant that like, how would I differentiate? Because as long as, if you think that rape is wrong in America and rape and is wrong in Afghanistan and Iraq or anywhere else, that it means that you think that something is wrong across the world.
Yes.
Cultural relativism thinks that it's not the case. So if you think that is the way that you are a more moral objectivist, then you are a cultural or a moral relativist, that you think that morals are relative and what's right or wrong is decided more by culture than is decided by any other standard.
A very Franz Boas way of looking at it, I guess. But I never thought in terms of cultural relativism. I mean, when we're talking about, violence against another person where we have a definite victim, then I have to be objectivist.
Yes, and that's my view as well, obviously.
Okay.
And I think that those who claim to be progressives and who claim to be defending liberal values, I think that they should be ashamed of themselves for defending religious orthodoxy.
At the same time, while I agree with that statement, I'm not comfortable with making a broad generalization against a billion people at one time.
You're not making a general population, but on you can. I mean, look at any ideology. Communism.
Mm-hmm.
Communism. Not all communists are innocents. Where I can assure you that there are a lot of communists who are peace loving and they want to coexist in the world. That is a fact. There is an ideology, which is communism, that I think is evil. But at the same time, you can differentiate how many people believed in communism, which I think is more than 1 billion, and still, like, you have China right now, and you have the Soviet Union, and you have so many countries and so many people. My uncle, for example, is a communist. And so you can say that communism is evil without thinking that without saying that all the communists are evil. You can still differentiate people and ideas. And people believe in ideas and ideologies. I mean, what really makes up a person, and humans are very complex beings, I mean, they may identify as communists, but there is a lot of input on their moral framework that comes from a lot of places. I mean, me and my brother and sister all grew up within a liberal Muslim household, and they believe in different and they got their morals from liberal values at the beginning, because my parents did not enforce religion or any, so they are good based upon the values that they were taught before they became Muslims. So if they're going to become good people or bad people, it's because of the values, and these values that they grew up with had more impact on them than Islam. So even if somebody claims to be a Muslim or claims to be a Christian, what the moral action and the no moral action is a result of much more complex environment, and what really affects the more of the person than just simply the label of religion. I mean, we all have these labels, and we judge people by this label of religion, but what really makes somebody moral and non-moral is a lot of mixed factors to what really makes somebody moral and not moral. I mean, the environment you grew up with, your parents, if you grew up in a war, if you grew up in a peaceful environment, that all changes things versus just like simply whether you believe in Islam or not.
I would love to have a conversation on where you feel that being more or less secular in a theocracy, where you get the moral values when you didn't have families that were pushing a religious source for that. I would love to have that conversation, but that is going to have to be at another time. In heaven,
we're going to have that.
I doubt that. But we'll have to move on to the next video.
Can we have this camera focusing on all the audience? Because every now and then, every time we have a conference, every time we invite a speaker, they always can come with the same accusations. this speaker supports death penalty for homosexuals, this speaker supports death penalty for this crime or that, he is homophobic, they subjugate women, etc., etc., etc. It's the same old stuff coming all the time. And we always try to tell them, I always try to tell them that, look, it's not that speaker that we're inviting who has these extreme radical views, as you say. These are general views that every Muslim actually has. Every Muslim believes in these things. Just because they're not telling you about it, or just because they're not out there in the media, doesn't mean they don't believe in them. So I will ask you, everyone in the room, how many of you are normal Muslims? You're not extremists, you're not radical, just normal Sunni Muslims. Please raise your hands. Everybody, mashallah, subhanallah. Okay, take down your hands again. How many of you agree that men and women should sit separate? Please raise your hands. Everyone agree. Everyone agree. Brothers and sisters. Subhanallah. So it's not just these radical sheikhs then. Allahu Akbar. Next question. How many of you agree that the punishments described in the Quran and the Sunnah, whether it is death, whether it is stoning for adultery, whatever it is, if it is from Allah and His Messenger, that is the best punishment ever possible for humankind, and that is what we should apply in the world. Who agrees with that? Allahu Akbar. Are you all radical extremists?
Allahu Akbar.
Subhanallah. So all of you are saying that you are common Muslims, you all go to the different masajid Norway, or are you like a specific sect, like the Islam net sect or anything like that? Are you like that? No. Are you like that? Please raise your hand if you're like this extreme Islam net sect or anything like that. No one. Allahu Akbar. How many of you just go to these normal masajids in Norway, the normal Sunni mosque? Please raise your hands. Allahu Akbar. So what's the politicians gonna say now? What's the media gonna say now? That we're all extremists? We're all radicals? We need to deport all of us from this country? Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar. Takbir! 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 May we have the next question, please?
Okay,
He's a good MC. I can give him that for sure.
So this guy is telling me that all Muslims are the same, that what we would identify as radical Muslims, if they believe in the death penalty for homosexuality, for adultery, for things that are not even considered crimes, he wants to oppose the death penalty. And not just any death penalty, he wants to propose the ones that are laid out in the Quran, whether it's beheading or stoning or whatever other type of barbaric criminality by our standards. He says this is the norm. What we would consider extreme, he says is the average. And he wants us to believe that there's no such thing as a moderate Muslim, that what we would recognize as extreme is the norm. So how would you respond to that?
Well,
and forget the cameras over there.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I mean, the sample that he has in this video is a small sample that cannot really say.
Now, somebody else has pointed this out to me, that this is all one room. There, everybody's gathered together. You've got the camera on everyone. And maybe they're hesitant not to raise their hand. Maybe they're all at the peer pressure
and it's also it's the immigrants, and that's something like when it comes to Europe, immigrants, Muslims generally tend to hold the most extreme views, and that I've made a total article about this that I can explain later. That because of the European immigration system that is kind of set up in a way that people, when they immigrate from Muslim countries, they end up being with the same region that they came from, and their ideas do not evolve, and they don't integrate to the way that. I mean, one of the main. And there's a major study done on urbanization that says that. Bless you. That made on urbanization. That said, like when you
Don't magically enchant me. I don't really.
When you immigrate to like a metropolitan city, and your neighbor is a Jew, the other neighbor is a Hindu, the other neighbor is an atheist, and things like that, your beliefs, the beliefs that you come from, the culture you come from, are going to be watered down. And what happened in Europe is that many of the Muslims end up being with each other, and those like generally come from a moderate household end up being in a more extreme. So that's a very much a European phenomena.
Yeah, I don't want to apologize for these people just by saying that maybe there's an explanation for why they're all raising their hand. Just because I think that maybe there's an explanation for that doesn't mean that necessarily is the case.
No, it's probably it's not the case. It's that probably it is the case that the majority of people over in that mosque actually believe what they say they believe, and I think that we should, when somebody says that this is what I believe in, we should tell them that this is what actually you believe in, other than make up our own root causes for terrorism manifesto. That has been a much bigger failure.
I can see how that might be misinterpreted. Could you paraphrase that?
Yes, is that we have this, like whenever somebody like from Al Qaeda and ISIS is saying that this is exactly what I'm doing, this is what I'm following, this is the verses of the Quran I'm following, this is the Hadith I'm following, and then you have a guy like C.J. Woolman and people on the far left, they say, no, it's not actually why you are a terrorist, it's because we invaded some Muslim countries and you are, and there's some economic basis to it, and there's like always not religion. Like when you're gonna talk to the far left, it's always like economics, always like economic inequality, it has to do with racism, it has to do with politics, but it's never religion. There has to be like a major root cause that is not religion.
Yeah, as a Texas resident, I can attest that religion very often is the root cause.
Yes, and it's as I've mentioned in the previous video, that it's more complex, and there are some percentages is that how much religion is actually a motivation, but to deny that religion has any motivation is the extreme ignorance and delusion of some people who identify as progressives. So you have this, number one. When it comes to moderate Muslim and radical Muslim and things like that, I actually don't really like these terms because they are not really descriptive. And descriptive would be orthodox, literalist, and what I call a cafeteria Muslim or a liberal Muslim. So a cafeteria Muslim is somebody who goes to a cafeteria. You don't pick the whole menu. You pick a cookie and a coffee, and so it. What is generally known as this guy is a moderate Muslim is that, or generally the term is used, is the people who follow X amount of verses that are peaceful and non-violent. And these verses exist in the Quran. There are a lot of verses and a lot of hadiths that speak about peace and love and things, but at the same time there are verses in the Quran that are violent, and I think the same can be said about the Bible, but the difference when it comes to within Christianity and Islam is that the Bible was written after Jesus' death or crucifixion, versus
if you agree that there was a Jesus.
If you agree that Jesus to begin with, but at the same time, I mean, I think that the Christians agree that Jesus existed. I believe that Jesus existed, but
for the most part.
For the most part, but when it comes to Islam, is that the majority of Muslims believe that the Quran was written during the life of the Prophet, and the things that he said have to be more taken literally. So there are more literalist Muslims than there are progressive Muslims, and that makes up the whole difference.
So you mentioned something earlier about kind of a linear measurement when you're talking about moderate. You're talking about, you either adopt the religion in whole, in which you're an extremist, or you only adopt
for the most part
of it, or a percentage of it, which makes you more moderate. And of course, the less you adopt of that religion, from my perspective, the better. And
the less you're gonna commit violent actions because of religion. I mean, you can be less religious Muslim or moderate Muslim and still commit evil actions, but your motivation may be not religion. But if you are a literalist, it's more likely that you're going to commit these actions because of religion.
Yeah, one of the criticisms I often get is that people say that it doesn't matter how many millions of people you could identify in history that have killed people over in the name of religion. They want to say that people have killed people in the name of atheism too, which of course I would challenge people to find anybody who ever killed anyone in the name of atheism.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that.
Political ideologies, communism.
Yeah, an atheist blew himself just recently to kill 16 agnostics. It doesn't happen. Yes, I mean, you can have political ideologies like communism and that actually motivates people. But when it comes, I mean, so you have this. So he mentioned about the stoning, like in the video, he mentioned about the stoning of adultery. And so if you're gonna make a law in a country that says adulterers should be stoned, this country is not an extremist. They are following what the scripture is saying, or what the scripture literally saying. Because I don't want to stir up the moderate Muslims because it's
according to him, there are no moderate
Muslims.
I
mean, now, as a person who actually deals with international human rights and stuff, it's like, if I actually find a moderate Muslim, I'm gonna give you $10,000, because, especially in the Syrian Iraqi conflict, there isn't many of them. We hear about the moderate Muslims and stuff like this, or the progressives.
I don't.
Where are you? Please, can you give me 5 names I can see in which I do my research about? Is that there isn't many. Is that yes, there are progressive Muslims. There are people who believe in. I mean, people like Majid Nawaz and Irshad Manji who are like, Islam means to us that we should support gay marriage and women's rights.
There are people that say that Islam means that we should support gay
marriage.
I
mean, there are people who Islam, the Quran is a book, and it can be interpreted in any way you want it to be. To be honest, on a pragmatic level, hell yeah, let's support these guys. I mean, there isn't many of them. It's like when you hear a Muslim who says I support gay marriage, I think that U.S. foreign policy should be let's give $10,000 to every Muslim who supports gay marriage. It's because there isn't many, you have to give them an incentive, because the text is saying something again, and the moderates or the progressives are saying something completely different to what the literal interpretation is saying. So, yes.
Are you saying that America can afford to give $10,000 to both of these people?
Yeah, because it really failed in terms of, I think, identifying and finding what actually happens is that we thought a lot of it come to Syria, it comes to Afghanistan and Iraq, is that America thought that these guys are moderates because they don't look like the Taliban, but eventually it seems like that their beliefs have to some extent a lot in common with the Taliban. It's just that they don't really have long beards and they don't say Allahu Akbar when they kill infidels. But when they're gonna be in power, they eventually gonna start killing infidels. And
I've noticed on my own that regardless what the religion is, it seems that whatever religion, when they get into a position of dominant power, where they have power rule over law, then
they act completely different.
Exactly.
And when it comes to Islam, and that's why whenever I have an argument with a American, and when I talk about Islam and this on the Muslim world, they're like, oh, but I have this Muslim friend, and things like that, and he's peaceful and he's awesome, and my dentist is not a terrorist, and things like that, and they don't really understand is that, first of all, I mean that's called behavioral economics, and there's a lot of research done about this topic, is that when people are a minority, they behave so differently when they're a majority. And the Muslim Americans are not in any sense a representative of what the Muslim world is like. At all. Like the Muslims I met in America are like the most progressive people I've met in my entire life.
That was a funny thing.
Because
to me.
they live in a country in which Islam is not the most dominant religion. When it is the case, and it's the case for the countries that I grew up in, it is complete. They talk like the Muslim progressives here in America. They talk about minority rights. They talk about civil liberties and things like that. When Muslims are like 99% of the population, there is no such a thing as minority rights. There's no such a thing as civil liberties. There's no such a thing as gay rights. There's no such a thing as women are equal human beings. This is only Western American Muslims talking because of the integration of the culture over here, saying that this is what Islam is.
Okay.
Well, if that is what Islam is, then I'm 100% supportive of it. But don't say that this is what Islam is, because nobody takes Muslim Americans seriously outside America.
Okay.
Nobody takes them seriously, and they appear on CNN and they appear on Fox News like Reza Aslan and things like this. And this is what Islam is. And if you're gonna ask about a person of in Saudi Arabia or Pakistan, they don't even know who the fuck is Reza Aslan is. Reza Aslan can only talk to Western liberal progressives and lie to them about Islam, and then nobody cares about him in the Muslim world and nobody follows what Reza Aslan is, who is the moderate Muslim, quote unquote, in the Muslim world.
Okay, I wanted to continue that. The first five Muslims that I ever met in my life fit the exact stereotype that my redneck, country family had fed me about Muslims. The first five people that I met were exactly what I expected of Muslims. Now the next 20 or so were completely unexpected because it was in college. So I was meeting people that were very progressive, that were very educated, that weren't at all what I have been told to expect. And then when I see videos like we were just talking about, I'm alarmed that that's going back to the original thing that my family was telling me to expect. And so I want to see a duality. I want to have a broader perspective, but then videos like this kind of rob me of that.
Yeah, I mean there is a duality. There is a lot of views within the Muslim world, and there are progressive views, and there are I would like to term it was progressive because I don't know what the hell moderate means.
Means you don't take it all the way. You're only buying a little bit.
Yeah, and but based on statistics, and there is a pure research that's been done about these questions, and UN research, and I've spoke about, is that the majority of Muslims follow to the orthodox interpretation of Islam in which this guy is talking about. So, not to deny that the progressive exist, but the progressives are not the majority.
Okay, let me ask
Just to put it as clear as possible, there are progressive Muslims, but progressive Muslims don't make up the majority of the Muslim world.
Let me ask one more thing, because this guy specified that they were Sunni, that everybody at this meeting was Sunni. So now everybody that I've ever talked to who might identify as a progressive Muslim, I think, fell into the category of Shiite. I don't know the difference. So,
between Sunnis and Shias?
Yes.
Well, I mean, Sunnis are the majority of the Muslim world. They make up the majority. Shias are the minority. And then there are different people that they always show up on media that they think that they speak about Islam, but that's only the case in America. When they are in the Muslim world, nobody gives a damn about what they say. Like Ahmadiyya Muslim and Sufis and other. So like they show up in American media, they use American ignorance, they say this is what Islam is. But when they go to the Muslim world, nobody cares about what they say because nobody even considers them Muslims. And that is not my definition of, I don't really define who is a true Muslim and who is not a true Muslim. I can always speak about statistics about what Muslims think the other people are Muslim or not Muslims. As what the differentiation between Sunni and Shia is about the successor of the Prophet. So Sunnis, the Sunni follow the establishment, which is that after the Prophet Muhammad died, whether you consider him a prophet or not, according to the Shias, he said that in a night called Laylat al-Ghadir, Layla means night and Ghadir is the place, I think, where it was held. He said that Ali, who is his cousin, is going to be my successor. After I die, he's going to be the caliphate, the first caliphate. according to the Sunni version, they say that it's Abu Bakr who is his friend, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and his last name as-Siddiq means the friend, and the honest friend to Prophet. So he should be the first caliphate. Muhammad died, and there was a conflict happened, and Abu Bakr became the first caliphate. That means what? That means the Sunni story won over the Shia story. But this war continued. Is that the son of Ali, who is the Shia, was beheaded? I think he killed. I think beheaded by Yazid, who is the first or the second caliphate in the Umayyad Empire. So it's a war about it's the conflict between Sunnis and Shias is a conflict about who should be the successor of the Prophet Muhammad, and that happened 1,400 years ago. So
I'm gonna completely bend this in a different direction than I even wanted to go. You mentioned Yazid, and I'm giving a speech this weekend on Satanism, and it came up that the Yazidis.
oh, there are two different things.
Okay.
Yazid is a name of the second caliphate who was a Muslim. Yazidis, even though they sound the same, but Yazidi is a religion.
Okay.
That is a mix of Zoroastrian, I think, the name in Persian, in the Persian part of the world, and they actually I don't think they have anything in common with Satanism, except that it's the god of the sun. That is what they believe in.
If I understand this right, it was the archangel, the principal angel over the others, what they called the peacock angel.
Yes.
And when God created Adam, he commanded the angels to kneel to Adam, and the one that Melech Taus, which I would recognize as Satan, was the one that refused to kneel to Adam, and all of the Christian denominations would identify that guy as being Satan, and then God supposedly commended him for not kneeling to Adam, but only kneeling to God. So we have this archangel who was never fallen, but was redeemed by God immediately. And from what was explained to me by somebody in Dubai, was that this religion dates back to like Babylon, and that there's two different interpretations of the same story, which is where you get Satanism on one side and a commended archangel on the other. But as I said, that was a different direction that I really wanted to go.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Yazidis, if I can speak on current affairs, is that Yazidis are considered heretics by Islamic extremists.
Now they are considered Satanists in a sense by.
No, they're not considered Satanists, but they are considered heretics because they do have some common story, as you mentioned, within the Abrahamic religions, and they that's why I think. I could be wrong, but I think, and I could be right as well, is that I think that because they see that the religion as a twist of the Abrahamic religions, they are thought of as infidels, and they should be killed, even though that they are believers per se. I mean, they do believe in a God, but at the same time, they twisted the Abrahamic story of who should kneel to Adam and things like this. Therefore, they're considered infidels, and they're a minority. I mean, the Yazidi religion is not really common in this world anymore, but it's still a belief that is shared by some parts of northern Baghdad, northern Iraq.
Right. I should have introduced you at the beginning of this segment, but
I'm Mr. Brown. I'm Mr. Brown.
Okay, you don't mind if I say your name, right?
Sure.
Okay. Faisal Saeed Al Mutar, thank you for explaining all this to me, and we'll get to the next topic after we shut off the cameras. Thank you.
Thank you.
Child girl, you know I've seen a lot of what the world can That should be the whole video. It's just you playing with the doll and some like 70s folk music in the background.
Huh. What do you want?
Okay, dog's out.